Hello, I'm Harry Hudson, Head of History at West London Free School in Hammersmith, in obviously West London. I'm going to be talking today about some of the work we've done here in the History Department to develop a broad and balanced curriculum at Key Stage 3. Worth sort of starting by saying that although I'm really pleased with some of the work we've done in our Key Stage 3 curriculum, I by no means think that our curriculum is a finished product, and I'm looking forward to seeing some of the other contributions in the curriculum week to see what we can learn from ourselves and continue to work on, because it is very much a work in progress. It's something we are still thinking about, as I'll explain a little bit more as I go through. I thought I'd start by answering that sort of perennial question for history teachers. Across Key Stage 3, we've only got 18 half terms, but there's so much amazing history we could teach. How have we decided what to teach? We've taken a broadly chronological approach, as I'm sure many colleagues watching have. We start in Year 7 with the Anglo-Saxons. We go through the Normans, medieval monarchs, really enjoyable unit that. Then we go through the Crusades, Henry VIII, sort of early Henry VIII, the Reformation, and then we end Year 7 with the units on Renaissance Europe, so sort of voyages of exploration, Columbus, the New World, the witch craze. We look at wars of religion, things like that. And Year 7 really is intended to sort of hook pupils into history, particularly those who might not have done that much at primary. We are in an area as well, we get pupils from lots of different primary schools joining us, so we can't be sure what they have done at primary. Year 8, we sort of take up the British political narrative, really, and we start with the later Tudors, second half of the 16th century, then we go through the English Civil War, and then the second half of the 17th century with the Protectorate, Restoration, and then the Act of Union and Hanoverian succession at the start of the 18th century. We then jump forward a little bit to slavery, the abolition of the slave trade. We look at Industrial Revolution and sort of some of the social reform that accompanied it, and then the rise of the British Empire, really around the world. We do sort of case studies in India and Australia, in North America, and in various parts of the world. And then in Year 9, we take a pretty much a 20th century curriculum really there, and it is very global too. We start with Year 9 with the First World War. We then look at Russia, which is a new unit actually that we've introduced in the last year or so, because we teach Cold War later on at Key Stage 4, Key Stage 5, but we felt there was a real gap in pupils' understanding of some of the sort of the preceding history. So we've introduced this new unit of Russia, sort of end of the Tsars, and the revolutions in 1917 all the way through to Khrushchev. We then do the Nazis and the Holocaust. We do a unit on decolonization, which sort of follows on from that unit at the end of Year 8 about the rise of the British Empire. Then in Year 9, we look at its kind of demise and fall. Quite a challenging unit to teach, so you can imagine that, quite a lot of quite tricky history, but it tends to go down well with pupils. Then we end Year 9 with these two really interesting, again, global history units, civil rights, and then modern China, which is largely kind of China under Chairman Mao. And these are bits of history that tend to speak really well to pupils, and we've sort of positioned them where we have, obviously because of chronology, but also we wanted some history that would really catch pupils' attention, even for those who weren't taking it on to GCSE or beyond. That sort of, again, that classic problem. We have matched each of those units of content with a different skills focus. So you can see here in Year 7, we largely are just looking at kind of writing skills, so selecting evidence, creating explanations, writing essays, all those sorts of skills that we want to see pupils developing in GCSE and beyond, but also skills that just as pupils of history, we want our pupils to know. In Year 8, we introduce source analysis, particularly in the first couple of half terms. And that's where we're teaching all the sorts of skills, again, that as history teachers we teach when evaluating primary sources. We do want to keep them going, though, with essay writing skills and writing in general. So we keep going with some essay writing skills in a couple of half terms too. And then in Year 9, that's where we introduce some work on historical interpretations. We want to keep the sources going, though, source analysis. So we do that in first spring half term in the Holocaust unit. And then we end Year 9 with essay writing skills as well. And we've tried to kind of marry those up so the skills kind of build upon each other. And by the time they've ended Year 9, the idea is that really they've got the skills really that are assessed all the way through to A-level. I mean, the A-level coursework, we do the OCR A-level here. And the A-level coursework, the 3 AOs are writing essays, evaluating sources, and evaluating interpretation. So we've tried to introduce pupils to those by the time they finish Year 9. This is also a new development that we've introduced in the last couple of years. We've got sort of mapping onto our Key Stage 3 content curriculum map. We've got our substantive concepts curriculum map. And this is something we're very much playing around with at the moment. We're sort of rolling out and seeing how it goes. We've been pretty pleased actually with how it's worked in the last year and a half, couple of years. But it's something, as I say, we are going to continue to tweak. And what we did is, as a department, we sat down over a number of department meetings. We came up with a list of 7 substantive concepts that we wanted pupils to really have thought and been taught explicitly about by the end of Key Stage 3, because we felt this was something we weren't doing enough. It was sort of the thing we were doing sort of on an ad hoc basis, sort of individual teachers lesson by lesson, but we wanted to kind of codify a little bit more and write it into the curriculum. And the 7 we came up with, you can see here: religion, ideology, social structure, power, war and conflict, rights, the economy, and then empire, states, and nations. And we distributed those across the units depending on where we thought they fitted best across Key Stage 3. And not only does it have the advantage of really introducing people to, well, what is an ideology? What is the concept of rights? What does it mean to talk about an empire, a nation, or a nation state? But also it does lend itself, as you can see, to interleaving a little bit more nicely. So it means that pupils get there's a better chance at tying together bits of content from across the various units they do, both within years, but also across years of Key Stage 3. And as I say, it's early stages still with this, but we've been pretty pleased with how it's landed so far. I'll talk a little bit later about how we assess that at Key Stage 3 as well. So that's a kind of overview of the curriculum, and I've shared some of those resources with this PowerPoint. In terms of then how we go about building individual lessons, we use the Collins Knowing History textbooks at Key Stage 3, across Key Stage 3, and we operate largely with those are the sole resource that we use. So we don't have sort of much resourcing for individual lessons beyond that, which is obviously a great advantage. We don't do much kind of cutting or sticking, things like that. So we have class sets of these textbooks, and planning for lessons would largely involve kind of going through, annotating the textbook, and sort of drawing out key words, identifying where we want to question pupils, identifying where we want them to think a little bit harder about certain things, where we might integrate kind of talk to the person next to them, call or response, things like that, into the lesson. Each textbook double-page spread we would aim to cover in a single 55-minute lesson, and each of those double-page spreads is accompanied by a PowerPoint, which are all centralized. So we're quite a heavily centralized department. Each unit has its own set of PowerPoints on the shared area, which colleagues use as a matter of course. And you can see they have a very simple setup. So all the way from start year 7 to end of year 9, there'd be a kind of title slide, title date, and then each unit has a background image that kind of unifies the unit across that half term, and pupils quite like that as a sort of a sense that the unit is kind of tied together. We might start a lesson with some knowledge recall questions, either put up like that as a whole for pupils to go through on their own, or we would do them one by one as a set of mini whiteboard questions. So we wouldn't put the questions up all in one go. Obviously, we'd either just read them out or put them up one by one and go through them like that. We use slides that are sort of text light, but image heavy, really. And we like using images, really. So we'd use maps. We sometimes put up keywords, and we would explicitly teach keywords before we sort of pre-teach them before that pupils encounter them in the text. And then, yes, we use lots of images of the sorts of things that we're teaching about in the textbook. The textbook in light sort of throws up so that we can elaborate, we can explain things in our own words, we can sort of try to bring it to life a bit in that way. We would intersperse that with sort of knowledge comprehension questions, checking for understanding, which we'd expect pupils to do in full sentences. They'd normally do 5 of these for a double-page spread, and we'd either split them up into kind of 2 and then 3, or vice versa. And we push pupils to explain things really well, to include details in their answers, and we'd obviously circulate while pupils did these in silence in their books as they were going. The curriculum kind of on a half-term basis operates, the lessons work in a kind of paired structure. So for each of those reading lessons, each of those double-page spreads, there is a writing lesson that accompanies it, and that would be the kind of the even-numbered lesson. So you can hear I've just taken a screenshot from the shared area. So lesson 1 would be the reading lesson of Anglo-Saxons. Lesson 2 would then be the writing lesson that accompanied it. And for each of those half terms, one of those writing lessons would be a writing workshop. So for the first half term of year 7, where we're thinking about selecting evidence, we would get pupils to do a writing workshop about how to select the best evidence. And you can see we do tasks like this, where we put up a point and we get pupils to discuss and then write on their whiteboards 1, 2, or 3, which is the best bit of evidence. We do the same thing with explanation. We might do the same thing with justifying a line of argument when we're doing one of those essay writing skills focuses. But what that means is that by the end of the half term, pupils have done normally 5 writing lessons, which accompany those reading lessons, which are really focused on those skills of historical writing and analysis that we want to teach kind of in tandem with the content that we're teaching too. A writing lesson then would normally take the form of some sort of knowledge, sort of recollection. We might do a mind map task. We might do a sort of table-based task, something like that. And then once we were confident that pupils had sort of were secure in that knowledge, we would then transfer that to some extended writing. We have these sort of template slides here, which vary depending on the writing skills. So the sources slides obviously are different from the interpretation slides, are different from the sort of explain why slides. And we would model this, we'd scaffold this with pupils, as you might expect. And then we'd leave pupils to do either a full paragraph or half paragraph or 2 paragraphs on their own, using sentence starters, using key vocabulary, and then gradually obviously removing the scaffolding as we went through Key Stage 3. In terms of how we assess this, pupils are assessed at the end of every half term, and some of those go home by the form of sort of formal reports to parents. Some of them are just sort of informal summative assessments that we do internally, and those normally involve some sort of mind map, some sort of multiple choice, questions. We would do timeline tasks where they're matching the date to the event. We would do some sort of specific writing focus task based on the skill that we're teaching that half term. So again, in that first half term of year 7, we do something on knowledge selection, what are the best bits of evidence to back up this point. Something we've introduced alongside that substantive concepts curriculum map is an assessed task on that. So we might ask them to define the substantive concept that they've been studying that half term, and then we would get them to do something like describe how power is distributed in the period you've been studying, or something like that. And that's a question, again, that we would have talked a little bit about with pupils before, but they'd be expected to go in with no notes and write about that, because we want obviously to see how well they've understood it, how well they've remembered it. And then we would finish with an essay, normally some sort of extended writing. So if the focus of that half term has been essay writing, we'd ask pupils to write an essay with no notes, with no plan. That again, we would have done some planning on in lessons, but we don't want them to take anything in to the assessment. Or if it's a sources based half term, they would do some sort of writing on an unseen source. So we'd get them to do a paragraph or 2 on an unseen source, or in year 9 an unseen interpretation as well. To give you some sort of sense of how this has landed with pupils, we've done some pupil voice quite recently, and pupil history is a really popular subject with pupils at WFS, and we have a really high uptake at GCSE and A-level, and indeed we normally have sort of between 10-20 pupils going to do history at university as well, with the second biggest subject at A-level after maths. So what we're doing at Key Stage 3 does seem to be working. It does seem to be popular with pupils. They like that sense of progression of moving through the textbooks across to Stage 3. They really like as well the range of history that we teach, some of the political stuff, some of the British stuff, but also the global history too. And again, they like the sense, I think, of progressing on to progressively more difficult history as we go through the key stages. And that is something that's the kind of line we use with pupils as we introduce them to new content. And they also like the enthusiasm we teach with, and you'd kind of hope that, I suppose, as a head of department, that the department would be teaching with enthusiasm. But I think the way we structure the curriculum does allow us really to kind of sing the joys of the history itself. It sort of puts the history front and centre. I've attached some resources to this presentation, and I'm more than happy to share more resources. So do please feel free to get in touch if you'd like to discuss anything I talked about, or if you'd like to see some more of our resources. I've attached some curriculum maps, some model PowerPoint slides, and then some example assessments if you want to have a look at those as well. And I've been asked to come up with 3 questions to finish my presentation. And these are all things I'm really thinking about at the moment. I would be really interested to hear what colleagues are doing on these around the country. So that first one is a big one. How do you balance breadth and depth? And you'll have seen that our Key Stage 3 curriculum is one that is very breadth-based. So we have sort of predecessors before me as well have made the conscious decision to prioritise breadth over depth. But I would like to introduce some more depth to it, to individual units. So I'd be interested to know how colleagues are doing that. I'd also be interested to know what you assess in your Key Stage 3 end of year assessments. Do you assess content for the whole year or just the stuff from the last unit taught? And then also how you teach substantive concepts at Key Stage 3. Because as I say, this is relatively new to our Key Stage 3 curriculum in the last 2 years or so, really. And it's still something I'm playing around with and want to see what colleagues are doing elsewhere. So I'd be really interested to know your answers to some or all of those. I hope this has been some use to you. And as I say, please do get in touch if you have any more questions. Thank you very much.